Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the End in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin, and this recording is a long time coming. Super excited to have you. Thanks so much for being here, Skylar.
I'm so excited. It has been a long time coming, and we always have such good conversations. So the fact that we're having it recorded now is perfect.
I know, right? It really is. It's been a while too. So it was so nice, like reconnect prior. Can you tell
hmm
us a little bit more about what you do, who you are, just kind of set the tone for today's show?
Yeah, so I am a branding and web designer. I went actually from being a coach to brand and web designer. So my journey has been a little bit different than I think a lot of people experience. And because of that background, one thing that's so important to me in the process of designing is creating something that is really based off of telling your story and creating something that is aligned with brand psychology. So, how is it that your brand and your website can connect and align with the people that you're really wanting to connect with rather than just selling and, making it all about you pretty much. So, I absolutely love it. And it's just that creative part of me that gets excited when, there's that opportunity to do it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's so good. I love the way you approach branding. And for our listeners, can you kind of explain, like in your own words, what brand psychology is? Because I don't think
Mm,
anyone's really talking about this. And if they
yeah.
are, it's not as depth as you go, you know?
Yes, yeah. So, brand psychology is basically um, positioning your brand both in strategy and elements based off of your ideal client. So, thinking about their desires, their pain points, the emotions that you really want to elicit in them when they interact with your brand, your website, and taking all of that information about their emotions and the experience you want to have and putting that into a brand that helps elicit that. So it's almost like thinking about what are the emotions that will help move them towards the action that you ultimately want them to take, whether it's on your website, your social media, all of the places that you can show up in your branding, and aligning that in a way where it's like we're not just looking at creating this brand from like a logical side, but the psychological side that allows people to connect more deeply with you, and your brand, because and that's a lot where the storytelling comes in, right? Because that brand psychology ultimately allows you to tell the story of you and kind of where you come from and the creation of your business, but also the journey that they're going to go on. Like, what is that before? What is that after? And how are you bridging that gap? And so all of that kind of ties together. And basically, overall, like summarizing that is it's the emotions behind the brand that you're really designing and strategizing on to help lead people in a certain direction.
So good. We're always talking like emotional, story-based telling on the end in mind too. So
Yeah.
that really hits home. And can you share with us a little bit more about how you've made this transition from
Hmm.
coaching to web designer and kind of telling us your own brand story?
Yeah, so I started doing coaching as a result of my own healing journey and really wanting to help give the tools that were really impactful for me. And in that coaching, I specialized in like emotion and trauma releasing. So I was always very immersed in the emotional world. And so I was also at the time doing social media management on the side. And I know that's something we've talked about before. And in that process, I was asked to make websites by some of the clients. They were like, "Hey, do you know how to do this? Because we need this." And I was like, "No idea, but I can try, see what happens." And over time, I kind of left that to the side. I always refer web design as like a slow burning love affair where like it was chasing me the entire time and I was not paying attention. Like like almost like the guy best friend that you don't realize loves you and then you're finally like, "Oh my gosh." Um, but yeah, and so at one point one of the people I had done a website for with the social media management referred me to someone who needed a website. And I had never done it for someone where I was like creating a brand from scratch. Like I was creating a website from scratch for someone I had no idea who they were. And there was such a palpable difference for me at that time in the feeling and the excitement and the energy that I felt in that process as opposed to what I had felt with coaching in a while. And with a lot of hard reflection, I was realizing how much of a difference in my like soul and what really lit me up between these two things. And I was forcing the coaching really hard. And there was so much I learned from it. And that brought me to like that aspect of approaching this with brand psychology and the emotions and taking it from a very different perspective than a lot of people do. But it really was like that difference between what feels like I'm just going in circles and I have no idea how I'm going to get to where I'm going to go to I can see the path. Like I know where it's going to take me, but also I'm really excited to see what that looks like and kind of how it can get me there. So that was the difference between the two that led me towards one over the other.
Yay. Oh, I love it. I know I feel like every business owner goes through that where you kind of
Hmm.
try to like push off what's really calling you. And
Yeah,
it's interesting because I think sometimes, or most of the time, it's backwards, right? Like people
it
make
is.
these
Yeah.
web design, then they go to coaching. So I love
Yeah.
that about your story.
Yeah, I know it is very opposite. Like most of the people that I've met are opposite of that, and I always find it interesting, like how it differs.
I feel like it gave you a lot of knowledge around like how people think, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it did. I mean, I definitely think that one of the most interesting things to me in web design is like being able to like almost get inside someone's head, like on the ideal client side. And also, I always just find people's stories so fascinating and I love connecting with people. And so being able to hear, their brand stories and like what led them to there and creating something that allows them to really see what they've created and the value of that and sharing that with others, it's a very cool experience.
It's huge. I feel like that's what builds some of the best brands in the world, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of us before getting into business never really understood
Oh yeah.
that's how, not that we're being like manipulated, but like I love marketing. So like I use those types of words because I think it's kind of cool. Like we studied
It
brand
is,
in
yeah.
college, you know, it's like, wow, these brands like knew how we thought before we even put together the way we were
I
thinking.
know, it's wild. It's so wild.
It's a little scary at times, but it's also, I think, and I would love to know your position on this, like how AI is having impact
Mm,
on our industries. And I still believe there's such a need for humans, like in conjunction with AI, because we're
yeah.
the ones that are feeding it, you know, like we're the ones that are really building the data and the information. But what's your perspective on AI like this year?
Yeah, I think that it's such an interesting thing to think about because what I noticed in the last year too is that so many like web design platforms have some type of AI integration now to where you can like tell it something and it'll try to write something for you or even create a layout design for you on your website. And I think they're all starting points more so. Like I think AI is a great way to, especially if you're doing this on your own and if you're especially if you're doing it from the start, like it's a great way to like organize all your thoughts and try to figure out the right way to organize and word them and maybe even format. But I think where it lacks is that aspect of the brand psychology because it doesn't have that knowledge of emotions as deeply as humans do. It can do it a little bit if you t say like, "Hey, make this sound friendly," or whatever that is, and you guide it in that sense. But I think that it's a great starting point and it can help organize a lot of things. But when it comes to like the implementation of really understanding to a deep level how to position something or how to design. Like, I think in the design sense, it doesn't really understand how emotions and design really go together. So I think you can maybe get away with it when it comes to copy, but it's still not going to be exactly right. But with the design aspect of it and building out something that resonates, like it'll have an idea, but it's not going to be able to fully grasp what that can look like for, a business and a brand because it's not a human. It still at this point at least has a lot of like boundaries with that aren't able to fully understand the range of like the emotional side and how like the design can integrate that and lead people to a specific point.
Such a good point. Yeah, it definitely lacks that like personality, the
Mm-hmm.
authenticity that I'm
Yeah.
sure you're able to help your clients achieve. And I love what you said. It's a great starting point. Like if someone doesn't know what
Yeah.
they're doing or needs ideas, I use it a lot for like editing because I hate
Yeah, me too.
editing stuff or like writing an email. Um,
Yeah.
but I do think it's important to review that. And like a lot of people don't read
Yes.
what
Yeah.
they're sending, which I think can definitely get problematic.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, always edit that because, like, there are times where even if I give it the most specific instructions behind, like, make it feel friendly, make it feel like warm, like, think you're talking to this person and this is the kind of person that's saying it. Like, there are some times where I'm like, God, this is so cringy. Like, if I saw this, I would be like, delete.
I feel like it's those like canned DMs that you get. Like that's how I am.
Yeah.
Where you're
Yeah.
just like, oh my God, like I would like just never answer this. This is horrible.
Yes.
For sure. There's always like a time and a place. And I do believe with time, hopefully it will get better, right? And like
Yeah.
it's easier, which would be really cool. But I would love to know, like on the flip side of this, how you help your clients and what questions you ask your clients around their ideal clients' emotions and how you
Yeah.
start to pull some of that information from them in order to like create their design process on their websites.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different questions and aspects to take it. One of my favorite ones um, that makes people really think is, and it's more of like the storytelling aspect and like telling that brand story that we're talking about is what parts of your story do your ideal clients need to hear? And I think this one is kind of hard for some people because as new business owners or business owners in general, I think a lot of times we're trained to try to position ourselves, or there's a lot of knowledge or information out there that like positions ourselves in like that like authoritative, like I am like on a pedestal type thing, or like websites using like I help you with this. This is what I do. But that gets you to like kind of flip the script and think about like, okay, I'm not saying my story or creating my brand for what I think I need to say to sound good and to sound relevant, but more of like, what does my ideal client need to hear to one, feel understood, to feel seen, and also build trust that I understand their problems because I've experienced it to some extent or I have some type of understanding in there. And then there are really fun questions that you can ask yourself, like, if my brand was a playlist, what would be my like number one song? Or if my brand was a destination, where would it vacation? Like, what season is my brand? For the emotions, it's really simple of like, what are the emotions I want my ideal client to feel when they interact with my brand, when they're on my website? And another way that you can really think about this as a concept is like your website is essentially meant to mirror the experience someone has working with you or engaging with your products, whatever your business is. And so, how can you create that similar experience on your website that people will have working with you? And that's another way to kind of target those different emotions. So, if someone's working with you and you are helping them feel more at ease and peace and like kind of that sigh of relief, how can you create that same feeling on your website and within your brand? That's another really helpful like idea to think about with like the emotional side of things.
Oh, such a good point. I'm always saying on this podcast, obviously, I run a social media management agency
Mm-hmm.
in case anyone's just coming to the end in mind. So I sell my clients time, you know,
Mm,
I sell
yeah.
them ease, happiness, abundance of time for their family, their clients, however they wish themselves to spend that time versus being on
Yeah.
social media. And there definitely is like the peace and the relaxation that can come with that. So I love what you touched on. And I think a lot of us don't think about what we are actually providing our clients with. Like
Right.
actual experience versus the service that we're providing.
Yeah, and I liked your point too of like thinking about what is it that you're actually selling that's not like the exact product or service, right? Like what are the emotions you're selling is kind of another way that you're like talking about that. And that's another way that you can think about like that experience or the journey or what is it you need to mimic because at the end of the day, something that we're selling is minimizing a problem that our ideal client has or a struggle that they have. And if you can kind of identify those specific emotions that it helps ease or helps them gain, that's another way that you can figure out where your branding needs to lie in terms of the emotions to elicit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like our listeners are going to take so much away from this. I love the way you're
Yay.
describing it too. Yeah, it's different in the way like I've talked about it or even past guests have talked
Mm,
too. So I appreciate you talking about the ideal client. I think a lot of us also forget that like we are the version of our ideal
yeah.
clients. Like that's why we've created this business on some level. Like we desire the same things. And I think that that's what's really nice when we
Yeah.
are maybe stumped. Like, I'm sure you come across people that really have no clue. And I'm curious what you do or like exercises. Is it like journaling or like are you
Mm.
having a live time call with them to have these almost like deep conversations around their clients to get their brains working in that way?
Yeah, I always start with a pretty in-depth questionnaire. So like that's kind of the starting point where I ask a lot of the questions that I mentioned earlier. That's really the place where people's wheels get to start turning and thinking about some of the things that maybe they've thought about before, maybe they haven't because they didn't know to think about those things. And then I always do like a strategy meeting, and like a strategy workshop where we kind of dive into all of that to think more deeply about like now having a mirror for like the responses that they're having and asking follow-up questions to that to get a better idea of what that core is, and what that actually looks like for them, what the feeling is, like all of those different things to help. Because, there are a lot, and especially when we're at the beginning of our business. Like, I know I was like totally lost when I started the coaching stuff, and I had no idea. And I think one of the biggest things that one I learned in there, but I realized was one of my biggest struggles that was probably also what led me to, doing the web design aspect was I struggled so much understanding my own value and how to communicate that in an effective way. And I think as like especially in that niche, it's really, really hard to do it. I think in like marketing or, web design, those it's a little easier to like understand how to communicate that because it's more straightforward. But like for coaches or healers or, all those holistic things, like it can be really hard sometimes. And so I think that especially when you're new to business and that's the place you're going into, like understanding how to create that message that resonates with people is going to be so much more important when you're starting out because it's essentially your North Star. Your branding, your website, it's essentially the North Star that allows you to create a foundation for your business, and know where you're going, why you're doing it, who you're connecting with. Because I mean, I didn't have all of that for the majority of that business, which I think is why I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, who am I talking to? Like, I'm supposed to have an ideal client. What does that even mean? Like, all those things that were really confusing that now I'm like, if you start your business and you don't have it to a T, that's fine because it's going to evolve over time. But like, keeping that as your forefront of like always having some type of foundation to go with is what's necessary because that ultimate mission, that vision might stay the same, but the way you get there might change. And so letting yourself evolve with that, letting the branding evolve with that, and then knowing that what when you do have that foundation in place of like getting all of that branding together, the website together, it creates a more sustainable process for your like business long term.
I love that point because I think so many people fixate on the service, create this
Yeah.
entire brand around the service, then they grow as a person naturally, as you do as an entrepreneur. You literally
Yeah.
do to survive in this industry.
Hmm.
And then they look at their business and they're like, that has nothing to do with like
Yeah.
anymore, you know? And we've all been there. Like we've all done it for our
Yeah.
listeners too. Like, don't feel bad if you're sitting there like nodding your head.
There are so many people that there's so many clients I get that are also rebranders that are like I just met with someone the other day who was like, it's been 5 years and like our values and like the message we want to get across and the focus is completely different from where we started because we didn't fully know or have all the services or the things that we wanted at that point in time.
Because naturally you don't. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned at the start of your business, like how are you going to envision what your client needs when you're still figuring out what you need? Like
Yeah.
that's the reality of being a business owner. And I do love what you said going back to like in the beginning where we've been told for so many years as entrepreneurs that we need to be like an expert and position
Mm,
ourselves above our clients. And I
yeah.
really think that does more harm than good in the long run because we're
Yeah.
right adjacent. Like we might just be like two steps ahead and we're like pulling our clients up with us. We're walking the same path,
Yeah.
It's not about hierarchy at all. And I feel like that's so outdated that
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I think there are still some businesses that it probably works for, and it depends on like what your business is and also who that target audience is, because they might be like needing someone who is 10 steps ahead. Like, but then that's also up to you to then ask yourself these questions and think about these things we're talking about to really figure out. I mean, I'm assuming also that most people who are talking to you are probably on that like more level of, we're not wanting to create something 10 steps ahead. Like we want to create something that is welcoming, that is authentic, that is aligned with like where we're at and vulnerable, but also at the same time creating that like message of we know what we're doing at the same time. And there's such a balance there that I think a lot of people struggle with because it's almost like I think a lot of people see it as either or instead of there being a balance between like having that storytelling and that, relatability, but also the authority at the same time.
And I think your story that you shared earlier around your social media management clients asking you to do websites is the perfect description of that. It's like
Mm,
if you go all niche in on one small service, it's the
yeah.
same for Meraki. Like if we were like, no, we don't do newsletters, go find somebody else for that.
Yeah.
That's us giving up opportunity, that's sitting right in front of us. And even though we might fumble to work it out, if we're honest up front, like, hey, we're going to be learning this together. This is
Mhm.
a newer service that we're providing. It's not like we're going in blindfolded, right? We know marketing,
Right.
new marketing. So that's, I think, the other thing that a lot of business owners have heard niche down, niche down, niche down.
Yeah.
Forget that they're losing out on opportunity that's right in front of them.
Yeah. I mean, I will definitely say that I get that a lot, like, because I don't niche down to a very specific type of business. And I also don't niche down to a specific platform. And there are a lot of people, those are like the two main questions that I get asked when I'm like meeting with people, either clients or just like coffee chats with people. Those are always the questions. And it's always interesting because, the responses are always like, wow, that's so cool. Like, I love that you do that. Like, that's so great. And I think that's been, there are cases where maybe niching down helps a lot. And I'm sure that there are like web designers who have niche down that it's been amazing for them, right? And for me, like my approach is not like I don't want to be so specific that I'm only working with you, but like I'm so interested in everything and that I'm like it's not gonna be a big deal, right? And I think there's a lot of people who like I was explaining with the coaching business, like that was a constant thought I had, like niche, 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 niche. Like I was so general for so long and I'm like, is that why I'm not getting clients? Like what's happening? And then I did niche down and then it wasn't any different. And so it's really like there is so many different ways to go about it. And again, it just comes down to really understanding what you're wanting to do, how you're wanting to do it, and your story. Like what works best for you and what lights you up most, like to work with. Is it like a very specific one or is it more general? And then like allowing yourself to lean into that.
I really feel like if I didn't do that at the beginning of my business, at least, like, I don't know that Meraki would be 6 years old.
Yeah.
So that's why I share that with a lot of our listeners, because I think a lot of the listeners are also like energy healers or
Right.
coaches, like you mentioned, where they can help mass amounts of people.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, like it's like, of course you can, but like, who do you desire to help? Who do you enjoy
Yeah.
helping? Like, where do you enjoy helping them? And it sounds like you naturally were just enjoying helping them with marketing, with branding, with this online personality and brand that they're building. So
Yeah.
you're able to discover that like through your prior experience. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of us listeners as well, like, I even wrote that question down to ask you, which I feel like you touched on it already, but what would you say to the people that are like, I can help everyone, you know?
Yeah. It's hard because it's a hard thing to, because I know I've been there. Like, I thought that. Like, I was in that place of, I can help everyone. Why would I niche down? Why would I, like, limit myself when, like, everyone can benefit from what I do? And realistically, what I learned, one, in like trying to niche down with the coaching is, but also like I feel like in a way I still niche down now in the approach that I take. So maybe not the specific person I work with or like the specific business or the specific platform, but it is specific in the sense of like you have to be under, wanting the under or understanding the work that goes into wanting to connect with your ideal clients, not just sell. And so like there's that. But with the coaching side of things, and the, wanting to talk to everyone, it really makes you confused and overwhelmed. And if you approach your business from that state of confused and overwhelmed, then talking to everyone, you're basically just going to talk to no one because you're coming from an energy that's not even going to be beneficial and put you in a place of authority, that balance that we talked about earlier. And so having some type of clarity around that ideal client is still so helpful because one, it helps you build that brand like we're talking about. It helps you know what colors are going to resonate with them, the design that'll work for them. But then it also helps you have a better understanding of, what's going to work for your business because of the people you're trying to connect with.
So good. I feel like that's mic drop moment.
Yeah.
Everyone better be writing that down. And literally, as you said, balance, I wrote like balance down. I think
Yes.
that what we're coming back to is there's no definitive answer. And
Yeah.
that's what I think a lot of coaches or people out there will tell you, I have all the secrets, and no one does, like the
Mm-hmm.
consumer is ever evolving, society is ever evolving now faster than ever, with
Yeah.
leg ups that we have with technology. So you have to constantly be able to adapt in entrepreneurship. And like you said, I think it definitely comes back to balance. Like knowing your wheelhouse, knowing what you're passionate about is going to lead you to that, just like what you found, in your.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think another last thing that I also want to add to that is that the, I think the idea of trying to talk to everyone is also like that concept of like jack of all trades but master of none kind of thing, where like if you're trying to do all the things because you think it's gonna give you a competitive edge, it's sometimes going to be hurtful. Like I know like for your business, like it is more beneficial to do like a variety of things because those are all things your clients are needing, right? But then for people who are more in that space of like the coaching and healing, like it might be harder to find that specific person to talk to because it can be harder to position your messaging and value in that way because of just the nature of the industry. And so also just being careful of, that tendency as well, which I think falls into that same, arena.
And maybe the answer to provide is going back to the emotion that you mentioned
Yeah.
at the top of the episode. Like, what are you looking to convey in your clients? It doesn't matter if they're business owners, high achievers,
Hmm.
CEOs of multi-million dollar companies, or somebody that owns the mom and pop shop. It's like, who is it? What are they looking to achieve in this lifetime? And how are you going to help them with that outcome?
Yeah. And another, you got to get out of your own head in order to figure all that out too.
That's
Which is also another thing that can be hard, but taking the I out of it and, getting all of those answers down and understanding that. And then, when you're creating the visuals or all that kind of stuff, like that's where your own likes and interests can come in a lot more. But again, that's a balance. Everything is a balance, right?
Yeah, and that's why we need someone like you to help us, right? Because it's so much. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners are probably like, whoa, so much
Like that all sounds
information.
great, but huh?
Where do I start? So, can you tell us how everyone can get in touch with you and how they can hopefully start working with you too on this journey?
Yeah, so I offer both branding and web design services. I'm assuming that most of you guys who are listening don't have the branding set up already, since that's what our topic is about. So, in order to find all of that, you can pretty much find me on all the platforms just at my name at Skylar Sustin, Skylar with an A. And my biggest places to find me are Instagram would be the best social media. My website is also just my name, skylarsustin.com. And yeah, those would be the best place. And then you can also email me if you have any questions. That's also skylarsustin@gmail.
Yay. And we'll have everything linked below for our
Yeah.
multitask listeners.
Yes.
Check us out, follow Skylar, DM her, ask her questions. Like, this is an
Yeah.
open conversation, right? If you're like, what the heck is balance?
Yes,
I
please
have no
do.
clue. Yeah. DM us both. Put us in a group chat. We'll tell you what we're thinking. But definitely reach out to her, follow her. She posts amazing information. I'm constantly
Mm,
loving your posts and everything that you share from color psychology. I mean, everything that you need to learn, you can find through Skylar's
yeah.
resources. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.